it's the most basic things in life I feel and find that we don't think about, right? And we forget. And now what's our normal, quote unquote, is sitting in a chair like I am. But you're saying that there's so many benefits to actually being on the ground.
The way that you circulate lymphatic fluid is through muscular contraction. If you were just sitting on a sofa, just kind of pulling your fluids, it's not bad. It's not like a moralistic thing. It's just disadvantageous for the circulation of the vital fluids throughout your body.
On the floor as we do this podcast.
Yeah, I'm sitting on the floor, which I don't think is very strange. It's like welcome to the whole world.
That's true.
Most of the world / before just complete transition to like becoming a chair-based culture. Like spending time on the ground is very, very normal. Like spending time on the ground actually is the normal thing. So as I'm on the ground, and normal is a dumb word. It's a subjective word. But as far as like if my definition of normal would be like most conducive for cellular health, like musculoskeletal well-being. I said skeletal like a British person. So if we were just to put normal as something that's like, okay, like what makes your cells function best? We'll just call that normal, just for lack of, for just to find a definition. And so that's very normal. Like our body, there's actually a book called Muscles and Meridians by Philip Beach that's been quite impactful for me. And in that book, he refers to spending time on the ground, which again, most all healthy cultures around the world do that. Cultures that have minimal incidence of osteoarthritis in the hips and the knees have minimal issues around like, incontinence, like pelvic floor issues. Just like spine pathologies, things of the sort. Like just going through those ranges of motion, it heals the joints. It brings new fluids to the joints, and it's good for them. Circulates lymphatic fluid, better for digestion because your legs are closer to your viscera, your heart, your organs. So you don't have all this blood pooling up in your lower compartments. Think like cankles when you're on a plane. It's gross. Doesn't look good. Doesn't feel good. Makes you feel drained. Standing in a museum for too long, you're just like, ugh.
So sitting on the floor, is there a position that we should be sitting in or just our legs crossed, or what's the ideal position to be sitting on the floor?
There's no best position. So I have a whole chapter in the Align Method book about just spending time on the ground. I mean, it feels so stupid to talk about. It feels like dumb because it's like childish.
But it actually is not, because I think that it's the most basic things in life I feel and find that we don't think about, right? And we forget. And now what's our normal, quote unquote, is sitting in a chair like I am. But you're saying that there's so many benefits to actually being on the ground, which is why, and what I want to get to, like, I want you to talk about, like you have been, what are the benefits of sitting on the ground versus being in a chair? Like where I'm sitting right now in a chair, you're saying it's not great for my back, my hips. It helps with it. Like if I just sat on the floor, let's just put it this way. If I sat on the floor versus sitting in a chair, what would the benefits be? What would I kind of get from that? Or not just me, but everybody.
So a bunch. All right. So a few things. One, there's been various different research around this studying different cultures that happen to spend more time on the ground. So like Northern Africa, Southeastern Asia, Eastern Mediterranean, these places. There's also other things, at least Northern Africa and Eastern Mediterranean, they tend to drink eat pretty good, eat a lot of olive oil, which is also good for the joints. But very low incidence of osteoarthritis in the hips and the knees. And a part of their culture is they're just taking their hips and their knees through a full range of motion. It's very simple. That would be one thing that's pretty interesting. Another thing is, like I had already mentioned, digestion. Mm-hmm. So if you're eating and in order for you to be able to digest food, you're going to pull, like why you get sleepy when you're eating food is you're pulling a bunch of blood from your periphery and it's going into your viscera, into your organs, into your stomach to break that stuff down and then recirculate it and carry those nutrients to the rest of the body. So when your legs are closer to your heart, like think if you ever injured your ankle, if you ever sprained an ankle, everybody sprained an ankle at some point in their lives, your physical therapist, first thing they're going to say, compression and elevation.
Right.
It used to be rest, ice, compression, elevation. Then Merkin, the doctor fellow that created that in like the late 70s, he recently recalled that, I think in like the early 2000s. So it's like, oh, like my bad, ice is actually a bummer. You don't want to slow down the inflammatory response and stop that action. You want to actually support it. You just want to keep it circulating. So actually warmth, elevation, movement, stay out of pain, but elevation and compression. That's essentially what you're doing when you're sitting in any of those childish positions when you're on the ground. So if you're laying on your back, obviously it's just going to be more advantageous for better circulation. The way that you circulate lymphatic fluid is through muscular contraction. If you are just sitting on a sofa, just kind of pulling your fluids, it's not bad. It's not like a moralistic thing. It's just disadvantageous for the circulation of the vital fluids throughout your body. So if you are sitting on the ground like any kid would do, or person in culture that does this, you'll just naturally kind of move your body around. Like that's a healthy body, a body that just kind of wiggles a little bit. And, there's a fancy term for those wiggles called NEAT. It's what is it called? Non-exercise activity thermogenesis is the unnecessary definition of the acronym. And so what that is non-exercise. So it's not like the idea of exercise, I think, is cute. Like you think you're gonna like work yourself out into some new form. It's like, what about like that's 1 hour, 3 or 4 days a week? Like, what are you even talking about? It's like so minuscule.
Yes.
So it's like the rest of the day, like that's the align method. Like all I care about is like, what are you doing with the rest of it? Like you have so many coaches and magazines and Muscle and Fitness and everything to do the perfect Taibo workout or plyometrics or knees over toes or like whatever you do. The rest of the day is all I'm really interested in as far as like working with. Well, I like both, honestly, because I do enjoy like nerding out about training. But the rest of the daytime, that NEAT, that non-exercise activity thermogenesis time, you could be burning upwards of 2,000 extra, in quotations, calories just from living a little bit more of like a wiggly lifestyle. And if you were to take yourself into, so you'd say to go like northern Tanzania, where there's been a ton of research, like gut biome stuff, also with movement. Researchers from Southern California, from your part of the world, my old part, they went out there in the last few years and they attached these sensory systems, something, motor, whatever, to the tribal folks' hips and knees to track the range of motion they're going through the day. And what they found was that these hunter-gatherer, ancestral, like the romanticized people that the whole world is like, oh, whatever they're doing is the right thing. They are in resting positions about as much as industrialized cultures. So on average, it was like the exact number was 9.82 hours per day, if I remember correctly. And so that's like, okay, they're not just like running all day or like climbing trees all day, or doing like capoeira dancing and like playing drums. Like they're resting a lot. Like they're trying to preserve energy. So they're resting about as much as we are. Like we, representing like, industrialized Western culture, whatever. So the difference is, how are they resting? The way they're resting is they're in kneeling positions, they're in squatting positions, they're in the various different floor sitting positions, like that I pretty much outlined in the book / everywhere.
Right.
And it's they're actively engaging in their resting positions. It's not just outsourcing all of their mechanical efficiency to a device, in this case the device being the chair. When you outsource what your body would naturally do, then you begin to atrophy. When you atrophy, you start to become trapped. If you atrophy too much, then you're in a tight spot.
Right. You know? That's right. That's right. Does that mean, by the way, the wigglies, are you wiggling because you're uncomfortable on the floor? And so therefore you're trying to you're adjusting yourself constantly to find a comfortable position? Cause like right now if you're in an uncomfortable chair, you can wiggle a lot. You know, I'm wiggling a ton right now.
That's great. That's how a kid would sit in a chair until they were advised that they're sick and they like need medication. That's how a healthy kid would sit in a chair. They'd rock back on the chair. They'd go on the left side. They go on the right side. They're working their whole proprioceptive system. That's neurology. Like that's education.
So does that mean I'm getting the same benefits in this chair as you are on the floor because I'm like, I'm moving around? Okay,
There's nothing wrong with the chair. Chair's just a thing. It doesn't matter. It's just who are you in the chair? Who are you on the floor? In the chair? Right. But can you sit on a cushion on the chair, on the floor? Yes. I'm on a cushion. My whole setup.
Okay, let me look at your setup. I'm just curious.
So I got this cute little cushion situation about that wine.
Okay.
My hips are semi-flexible.
I would say they're more than semi. They would be very flexible.
But so I'm just saying that cushion is kind of small for a lot of folks. For most people, I'd say make your cushion like at least, I don't know, a foot high, 10 inches high or something like that. The big thing, if you want to have biomechanical efficiency within your sacrum, just your spine, your hips, you want to make sure your hips are up above the height of your knees. If your hips are up above the height of your knees, that will put your lower back, particularly the L5-S1 vertebra, they are in a bit of a shape of a wedge with the wide angle of the wedge facing out towards your belly button. And so what that suggests is that you want to kind of have the hips ever so slightly kind of like tilting forward. And that's kind of like a ready position. So if you roll your hips backward and you sit down on the ground without like having your hips up above the height of your knees, then you're going to be in that like sad puppy dog kind of like rolled forward position. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just putting a little like undue stress on the discs in your spine and such. So you can really relax into the architecture of your spine when you set your hips up above the height of your knees. That in and of itself, whether you're on a chair or on the floor or whatever, if you just take away that tip, those of you still engaged in this conversation or monologue, if you just take away that one tip, this whole thing was worth it. You can stop listening. Just do that, and it will make a massive difference in your life.
Wow, that's amazing.